I'd like to call to order this meeting. The board, and remind everyone, the board does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from it where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following a public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variances. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variances. If you would like to request that the board table or adjourn your case due to the absence of a full board, which we do have tonight, 7 out of 9, you must inform the chairperson immediately after the public hearing. Petitioners shall do their best to limit presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in a public hearing shall do their best to limit comments to 3 minutes.
Joseph, just a question. Because this is a special meeting, do they have the ability to adjourn the case?
Yes, they certainly do after the public hearing if they decide. So immediately after the public hearing, they would have to let us know.
Thank you, Joseph. Looking at the order of business, we have the approval of minutes from February 8th, 2018.
Motion to approve.
Is there a support?
I'll support.
Okay. Mr. Anderson supports Mr. Kroll's motion. Any discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. Minutes are approved. That brings us to new business. There's no old business, so that brings us to new business, case number 18-02-04, the public hearing on the appeal of the Holgistic, or petitioner and Stephen Ristagno, I'm sorry if I slaughter any names, owner for the following variance at 720 East 11 Mile Road. Variance A, waive 7 of the minimum required 15 off-street parking spaces to permit conversion of a former antique store into a holistic and naturopathic medical office with other services. Mr. Murphy.
In November of 2017 of last year, the Planning Commission approved a site plan to convert the existing building, which was previously used as an antiques, for the sale of antiques, to convert it to a medical office building. One of the contingencies of approval was that they obtain an updated and recorded shared access easement agreement with the current property owner directly to the east. Since they do share, you can see in the aerial photograph the layout of the parking lot, and you'll see parking spaces directly adjacent to the building along the east side of the property. And I'll move to the site plan, which will illustrate the property line and the circumstances that necessitate them coming in front of you this evening. So, the property line is located, directly east of the building, adjacent to the parking spaces, where you'll see on the photographs in the packet where the large bumper blocks, barricades have been placed, essentially right on the property line. So it prevents the property owner from using that access aisle that's on the property to the east to access their existing parking spaces. So the petitioner is proposing to modify their site plan to remove all of the parking spaces on their property on the east side of the building because they no longer have a shared access aisle since they're not able to obtain an easement agreement. They're looking to remove all of those parking spaces and install a two-way drive aisle that will lead to the rear of the building where they do have 8 parking spaces. The reason that they're here tonight is that the proposed use requires 15 parking spaces. So by removing all of the parking spaces on the east side of the building to accommodate a driveway to the parking spaces in the back, they eliminate 7. So they'll need a waiver in order to do that. It should be noted that the current parking layout that was approved on the site plan indicates 8 to the rear of the building, 7 to the east side of the building. So they would be in conformance with the required amount of parking if they were able to obtain that shared access agreement with the property owner to the east, which they have not been able to accomplish. So alternatively, they're coming free to you to seek a parking variance.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for Ms. Murphy?
Joseph, is the parking compliant then for the eastern property? And is it about 2,000 square feet roughly for 728 East 11 Mile?
I don't know. I didn't check to see. This particular modified site plan wouldn't alter the site plan for the property to the east. They're the ones with the drive aisle to their parking lot. It doesn't modify access to their parking spaces in any way, shape, or form. It only modifies the subject property. So I didn't bother to, we'll say, run the numbers. And it's been there for a really long time, so I don't even know if we have a file on that.
Sure.
But,
Thank you.
But this proposal doesn't modify access to their property in any way.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, is the petitioner present? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Good evening. Jim Razor on behalf of the petitioner, Stephen Ristagno. It's Italian. Ristagno. I screwed it up too, who stands with me. And we have Michael, who you know, great architect in town. And also we have Sonia, who is the operation manager of the facility.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure to be before boards and commissions in Royal Oak. Thank you very much for your service. I know that it takes a lot of time out of your days to read the packets and do the due diligence, and I served with some of you on this particular board, and it's my pleasure to present this to you. This is a slam dunk great thing for 11 Mile Road in Royal Oak. The Planning Commission loved it. I think they passed it unanimously. There were no objections to it, and it's really what we've been looking for this corridor. For a long time, Stephen had a antique business there for the last 8 or 9 years. It's really, well, 23. But for the last several years, it's really been a warehouse. There's been no life there at all. There's been nothing going on. And we know that Royal Oak and 11 Mile especially are really dramatically changing. And we've had a lot of investment in that corridor. We have a beautiful new hotel. We have beautiful architectural buildings, new architectural buildings coming in, and this homeopathic, neuropathic health and wellness facility is another step forward to the 11 Mile that we really want to have. This is a holistic medical anti-aging facility supervised by a physician. The physician lives in Royal Oak and will ride their bike to work. It's really cool. Nothing but positives, and now we have really a lot of life. And I want Michael to show you some of the visuals of how nice this building is going to look. And then I want to get into some of the issues that we have with the background with this easement agreement. So, as you can see, the building's going to get completely renovated inside, essentially cleared. The front of it is going to have a beautiful streetscape for all of us, bike rack, lots of great things, and importantly, and this will come up later, we secured a lease for 7 parking spaces right on this wall with our neighbor at 710, and there's a sidewalk right here for them to come in. Also, with this lease with 710, we've managed to get a first right of refusal for purchase of this building that's next to us because we like this neighborhood. Sonia and Margaret, and unfortunately Margaret, her partner, who I've known for a number of years, and actually I suggested, she was visiting the Hotel Royal Oak, and I suggested this building because she was talking about this great new concept. And I said to her, look at this building. It's a great building. She had a funeral tonight, so she sends her regrets. So we have parking here for this facility. We have a nice walkway. We have beautiful art. And honestly, we didn't think that we were going to have to come before the zoning board because we had 15 spaces. This easement agreement that we had was 23 years old. And there was shared use of the parking lot for the last 23 years from the guy that owned the Royal Oak Heating and Cooling building and Steve. And there really weren't a lot of problems with it, except the Royal Oak Heating and Cooling guys kind of parked all over the place, but it was okay. And in the last couple of years, when there's been no activity in our building, we let them park wherever, and that was fine. And now we have a tenant, And Mr. Murphy's department says, we need an updated easement agreement because the easement agreement that was originally entered into 23 years ago with the shared use agreement is signed by people who are now deceased and was never recorded. So we have this easement agreement that was never recorded. It's signed by the people. We've been operating like that for 23 years. And Stephen approaches Royal Oak Heating and Cooling and says, we need a new one. We need to update this. We need to update it because, you know, we need the parking. And they said no. They kind of didn't do anything. Their attorney was very rude to him. Nothing happened with it, and months went by. So at some point in time, we had to call the ball because they have an SBA loan. They have contractors ready to go. They have approved plans, but all this is going to expire. So at some point in time, we had to come to you and say, you know, we are unable to reach an agreement with our neighbor, even though we've had this agreement for 23 years. So this is what we have. However, what I can tell you is that from having a business on 11 Mile now for the last 4 years, there's a lot more parking. When I was on the ZBA, I was worried about parking on 11 Mile, and there was a lot of things that we couldn't accommodate. But there's a lot of parking, you just need to know where to look for it. And actually, one of the landowners is here to talk during the public hearing, because he's got about 40 spaces right by the hotel. There's a lot of parking if you work well with your neighbors. And unfortunately, we were unable to work with Royal Oak Heating and Cooling. But I have a lease agreement for the gentleman who is next door. And this is at 710. Joseph, I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy, would you possibly have something? I think this shows it. So if you look on the extreme right of your screen, you'll see that there is this parking lot, and this is a video production facility, and it's got 20 spaces, and they have maybe a couple people in there a day. Really cool guy, Mark, he's owned this property for 1 million years. He said, sure, no problem, I don't have a problem with it. So he executed a lease with us. It's for 5 years with a 5-year option. We gave us a first right of refusal on the property. So we have 7 spaces that are tied up. But because we want to be awesome, we have 5 spaces across the street tied up as well. Because Steve owns a building right across the street, which, you know that new barbershop thing that went in? And then he's got a thing with a cell phone wholesaler guy who doesn't have a lease, and that building's practically vacant, and he's got 18?
There's 15 parking spaces, 10 are for the barber shop. That leaves me 5.
So he's got an extra 5, so I have a lease for that for you to see. Now, Mr. Murphy will tell you quite rightly, you know, these private leases, even though they're for 5 years, with a 5-year renewal, is something that, you know, he doesn't have control over enforcement. But we've got a lot in this business, and we're not going to let this go south, and we've got an option on the building next door. So to us, it's very important to establish in this neighborhood. And actually, we need 7 spaces. We have 12, and they're all within 300 feet. You've got 5 across the street, we've got 7 in the parking lot next door. Which means the patients will have exclusive use of the 8 that we have. We can park our entire staff across the street. We have all the spaces that are in the lot to the west. And Michael, could you show them the art?
Oh.
So we reached out to Jason at the Arts Council about doing some great art on this building. That expanse, that wall is just bare right now. And so we've been talking with the Arts Council about doing some great art on this building. And actually, those are where the 7 spots are. So people will pull in there, they'll go down the walkway that's designed for them. It'll be very, very nice. So it doesn't seem like it'll be a problem. Looking at the factors that you have to decide, whether, first of all, factor 1 or A, whether the variance, if you didn't allow this, whether it would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. In the neighborhood business zone, I don't know of any use that's going to work with 8 spaces that we're left with because our neighbor has not honored this 23-year-old easement. So really, on the first factor, there's nothing we can do with the building if you don't give us a variance. And we already have a tenant here, and we already have a lease, and we already have approved plans, and we're already ready to go. The second factor is whether it does substantial justice to the applicant, other property owners. You know the rest. Well, it's not usable for another purpose without doing this variance. And everybody loves it. We're not putting in here something that anybody in the community has any objections about. As far as I know, looking at public comments, you have Royal Oak Heating and Cooling, and I don't know what they're going to say. But you have other supportive property owners, and nobody that was informed of this public hearing is here to complain. Because as all of us age in place, which is one of our goals in Royal Oak, who doesn't want anti-aging medicine? I want anti-aging medicine. I need all of it. I'm 54 years old. And I hope, and I know that this will be a super successful thing. They could have taken this to a lot of other communities. I'm the one that actually said this needs to be in Royal Oak. This is the place to be. They were looking at the Detroit DDA. They were looking at Birmingham. They were looking at a lot of other places. They wanted to be here. They wanted to be here because we're in the middle of everything. We've got great access to the freeways, 11 miles up and coming. It was affordable. So they really want to be here, and it's a great use. The other factor, the plight of the landowner is due to unique circumstances. We wouldn't be here. And the next factor, really, the alleged hardship is not caused by anybody else. This hardship is caused by Royal Oak Heating and Cooling. Their failure to cooperate with a 23-year-old easement agreement that has been in place and worked perfectly has caused us to be here. We didn't do this. We didn't fail to record the original easement. We didn't fail to do anything. We weren't part of what happened when the guy subdivided the land and built the building that Steve now owns. We're a victim here of somebody that didn't record an easement and a property owner next door that won't respect a 23-year-old agreement. So all of these factors militate in our favor. I hope you can see fit to move forward with this tonight. I realize, we could have adjourned it. I know it's a special meeting, but we have a time clock going with this SBA loan. And so, we would have liked, obviously, a full board to hear the entire thing, but we've got a timeline on this SBA loan, and we have been delayed and delayed by waiting for Royal Oak Heating and Cooling to call the ball. So we're very happy to be here. We're happy to answer any questions. We'd be happy to answer any questions about the facility, about our parking arrangements. I'd be happy to show you the leases that we have, anything that you want. But we would really very much appreciate your vote. It's a choice between this gorgeous renovation of this facility, which is going to cost
almost
$500,000 in the ground in this facility, of a facility which Steve has kept up very nicely, but it hasn't let any life into the street. And we really think we're going to have maybe 2 patients an hour. This is a very hands-on, very crafted sort of approach. This is not a cattle call of people. This is a couple of people an hour. And so with these people coming to Royal Oak, and we're going to add life and vibrancy to the streetscape, we're not going to add anything that's going to be a parking problem. We've got 35 spaces that we could use for overflow that you'll hear about in public comment. We've got 7 spaces next door. We've got 5 across the street, and we've got a couple of patients an hour. And we're going to add $500,000 in taxable value to a building that has been vacant without any activity for 7 years. Is that done?
Yeah, about that.
So, can I answer any questions for you? I'd be happy to.
Any questions?
I have a quick question. Mr. Razor, is the problem with the fact that Royal Oak Heating and Cooling would rather have the stripes on their side and have the drive aisle on the other side? Because I'm just curious here because the stripes are on closer to the other side, and would they feel more comfortable if it was on
First of all, it's
their
very
side?
nice to see you.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, if you have the view up that I'd like to use. So the property line, see that white van? The property line is right behind that white van. And so for 23 years, the arrangement was we co-used the driveway, and then we got those spaces on the side of the building. And when the man who divided this originally did it,
That's how he set it up, so he could build 720. And what happened is that when we approached them with the new easement agreement and said, hey, we gotta update this, planning wants an update, they said, why don't you give us a couple of spaces that you have? And we said, why should we do that? Because they kind of thought they had us over a barrel. They kind of thought, well, we'll get a couple more spaces out of this. And unfortunately, you know, we don't have the spaces to give, but unfortunately it's costing us this whole row of parking because they won't cooperate. And, you know, I could go to court and I could fight with their lawyer.
And I could prove that for 23 years there's been an easement and that the court should respect that. But that would take 12 to 18 months, cost Steve 75 grand or so, without a certain resolution. And unfortunately, Sonia, with her amazing operational experience and multiple degrees and master's degrees, and Margaret, with all of her degrees in running this and her healthcare experience, would be long gone by the time this litigation was done. So it makes more sense to come to you and say, I've got leases for 12 spaces. And if you want to see them, I'm happy to show them to you. So I've got 12 spaces where I need 7. So I've got under contract a total of 20 spaces for a building that requires 15. And I've got super cooperative neighbors, Steve, Gary, Charlie, I'm sorry. Terry, between Terry and Charlie, I think we've got another 50. What I'm finding from owning Hotel Royal Oak is there's a lot more parking in Royal Oak on 11 Mile if you cooperate with your neighbors. And I think we're moving maybe towards more of a shared use. What I'm also noticing is like more and more people are arriving via Uber and Lyft and bikes and other things. We have nights where the hotel is rocking, completely full, and the parking lot's half full because everybody's taking an Uber. And I think in 5 years, everybody's going to have an autonomous car built by Mr. Musk coming to their house. But in the meantime, we're going to have 2 patients an hour in a place with 8 spaces, and we're going to have 20 spaces under contract. Did I answer your question? Let me go back to your question.
Okay.
Because I think I kind of went off on a tangent. I'm sorry, Your Honor. So, I don't know what Royal Oak and Heating and Cooling is thinking, and they're here, and maybe they'll tell you. But I think what they're thinking is, well, we can get a couple more parking spaces out of this because we have them over a barrel. And honestly, we're the ones that put down the barricades because we just said, this isn't working, we need to move forward, and we'll divide this, we don't want any more problems. We don't want to go down into a future with co-using problems with this. It's time when neighbors don't get along, sometimes tall fences make good neighbors. I don't know what their plan is. I think it was a really bad decision for them not to play nicely. And I don't know if they want to do parking up against their building or not, or whether they have the width to do it. I've seen their trucks now parking up against that barricade, leaving them like a one-way aisle, which probably doesn't pass muster. I know they've grown quite a bit. I know that they're looking to be somewhere else. I know that, you know, they've got 15 trucks in a parking spot, in parking spots for maybe 9 of them, 6 of them.
They have 6 parking spaces, 13 service vehicles, and then they have 6 stationary between a dumpster, a scrap trailer, a lift truck, one of the owner's vehicles, and 2 office personnel, which for 23 years, I let them park anywhere they wanted, never had a problem with it, never told them to move a vehicle. And when I went to get this updated, all I got was, talk to my attorney. And when I attempted to talk to the attorney, basically he said, I'm not going to talk to you. Have your attorney call me. This started in early December, and it's now February, and we have no choice but to try to move forward with this, or I'm going to ultimately lose a tenant for no other reason than they don't want to play ball. And it wasn't right. They took my kindness as weakness. Figured they could hold me up for 2 more parking spaces. They only have 6, and as part of the reciprocal grant of easement, they got an extra parking space out of it for the privilege of me crossing their driveway to access my lot. They got a 7th parking space. They're now down to 6.
And it's unfortunate when there are neighborhood disputes like this, but fortunately we have good relationships with Mark next door, with Glenn, and with Mark. And can I show you these leases? I'd be happy to.
Yes, please.
And I do not have the signed copy of this lease,
I'll sign mine.
but it's between Mark
No, it's in between two of us.
No.
and Mark and Sonia, so if you want a signed copy, we'll sign it tonight.
Mark, please,
Yeah,
it's
there's
signed,
something like
but with Steve, it's not signed.
Oh, Steve, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yep. And we're very happy to have that first right of refusal on the building to the west.
Oh, yeah. Are you done, Ms. Anderson, with your question?
Oh, yes.
Did I finally get around to answering your question?
Well, I think I'll have to wait to see if
Okay.
heating and cooling.
How many employees is the facility planning on having?
3 or 4,
3 or 4?
and doctors will be contracted, so
Okay.
they will be coming when there are scheduled patients. If there's no patient, doctor wouldn't be there,
Okay.
so things like that. So with this arrangement, we would have more than enough to operate even bigger operation.
And it sounded like what you said, that the doctors and the employees are going to be parking in the lease spots that you've procured at other
We'll park
places.
across, they'll park across the street, definitely. And, you know, the nice thing is we finally procured local control of 11 Mile, and I know that concerned landowners like Mr. Klatt and myself and others are moving towards more of a road diet, more of a pedestrian-friendly 11 Mile. So tell them to be careful when they cross the street right now until we do that.
Yeah, what's the expanding upon that, if they do have to park across the street, what's the nearest crosswalk? Are they going to be?
Well, you know, the drag about that is you have to go all the way down to, well, you have to go to the Imagine one. No, well, Troy. You have to go otherwise, but people cross the street all day long,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
you know, they're gonna be doing it once.
You're not suggesting jaywalking, are you, Mr. Ray?
No, no, Mr. Kroll, as an officer of the court, I would never do that. But, you know, all day long people do. And 11 Mile is such a cool, vibrant corridor with so much life to give to us. It's just another step forward for us.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Sue?
Was the planning commission aware of these additional leases that you had?
No, they were not, because at the time that we were in front of planning, we didn't know that Royal Oak Heating and Cooling was gonna be a problem with the new easement agreement. We didn't even think we had to go to zoning. We went to planning, Mr. Murphy, could you help me, in November?
November.
15th. Yeah, in November 15th, our contingency from planning was, go get an updated easement agreement, because Mr. Murphy's office wanted to see one that was updated. And so when we approached Royal Oak Heating and Cooling after that meeting, we had no idea that this arrangement that's been going on for 23 years wasn't something they'd say, sure, because it would benefit them. But they said, no, we want more parking spaces from you. We want this, we want that. We have you over a barrel. And finally, you know, Steve said, no, it's time to, you know, it's time to sever this. It's a shame. But now, I have to tell you, even if Royal Oak Heating and Cooling came up with the signed easement agreement, the trust is gone. We'd be buying a lot of heartache, we feel. We'd be having their vehicles in our lot, their semis in our lot, there are issues with that. We just don't think it's a good arrangement anymore. And we think the arrangement we have with friendlier people who are happy to have us is a better arrangement than neighbors that are unfriendly and don't want us to be there, so. You know, now we have a barrier. I'd be delighted to answer any other questions that any of you may have. Hi.
You said that there's going to be 2 patients an hour, but I see at least 4 treatment rooms.
Well, that's if needed for acupuncture, for, you know, you always need extra space. Doctors will be consulting mostly, but if they need to touch the patient, they go to a treatment room where there's a table. So it will be, it's different kind of medicine. It's more consulting with patients. That's why you don't go and wait there for 3 hours, doctor. You have your hour and a half, next patient is an hour and a half, so you don't have really full waiting room. It's on schedule, and you come 5-10 minutes before, you do your business and you leave. There's no waiting time.
And I think I should add, there's no
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say I can answer that.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Well, in different treatment rooms are for different treatment. They're set up, the equipment that'll be in one will be this specific treatment. So the other room may not be used at all for several
Yeah.
hours. So they're rotating, like if I'm having acupuncture, all the needles and everything are in this room. So that room is only used for acupuncture.
Yes.
And then the other room is used for manipulation, where we have, we
Yes.
have licensed doctors with massage therapy. So the rooms are set up differently, so you can't have like 4 people in 4 rooms doing the same thing.
It's kind of integrative medicine, so the doctor might prescribe massage or acupuncture or talk to the dietitian. That's why you need different rooms.
Unlike an orthopedic facility, though, you're not going to have a waiting room filled with 20 people that are waiting for, detailed procedures. And, it's not a high volume practice with tons of patients waiting all day. It's a carefully crafted individual approach to anti-aging medicine. And I should add, planning, when we said the word massage, nobody went, oh my God. It was great. It's nice to be in the Royal Oak of 2017, where medical massage and medical modalities is something that adults can say, oh, cool. If I need that, I need that. So, and again, planning didn't have, there was no negative public comment at planning. I don't think there was any no votes at planning. So we're hoping to get the same unanimous approval from you folks today. We hope.
Are there any additional questions?
Yeah, just one more.
No problem.
As many as you
I
want.
might have missed this. The driving lane, now that you have those barricades up, how wide is your driving lane?
21 feet.
Okay.
So it's more than enough for 2. We do have to put in a new curb cut, which we will do, so that we have better access to it. But it's more than wide enough for 2.
Is that good enough for the fire officials in case there's emergency that they need to get in there?
The fire engines actually do have a reverse gear. I learned that recently. But yeah, the fire has indicated nothing. Mike, I think,
Right.
is designed.
Well, if you think about it, when the cars are parked there, that's what we already had.
Yeah, true.
We had a row of cars that were 20 feet and we had a 21-foot drive. Now they've got their 20 feet, we've got our 20 feet as 2 separate driveways. So when the cars were parked there, it was the same ratio or same amount of space.
And Mr. Murphy, just a question, if I may. There's been no objections from fire or public safety or any other department that I'm aware of. Great. Great. Thank you for the question. I'm happy to take more.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll close this portion and open up the public comment portion.
And if you have any questions for me based on anything that Royal Oak Heating and Cooling says, I'm happy to address them at whatever time you want. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment is open. Please approach and say your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Edward Schutte. I'm an attorney here in Royal Oak. And with me here today is Scott Ferguson and Glenn Renaud. And they're both owners of G&D Management, which owns the real estate at 728 East 11 Mile. And they also own Royal Oak Heating and Cooling. There's so many bad things said about Royal Oak Heating and Cooling. It's really not that way. It's quite the opposite. Under your ordinance, 770-124E2D basically prohibits the granting of a variance if the hardship has been created by a person who has interest in the property. And that's what we really have here. So the background is, before my clients owned the business or the real estate, apparently there was some agreement with Mr. Ristagno with the prior owners, which we were not parties to the agreement. It was not of record, so when they bought the real estate, it was not of notice to them. And sometime in around December, Mr. Ristagno stopped by and said, "You must sign this. You must sign this." And my client said, "Well, I need to have my attorney look at it," which is the appropriate thing to do. It's a real estate document. And it was sent to me, and I looked at it, and I saw certain problems with the document. And I said, well, I really should talk to your attorney about that, because he had the wrong entities involved in it. It didn't have the proper names of my client in there. And we needed to look at it on the basis of fairness. And what is fair? The old agreement that they talk about, which we weren't a party to, it would use our driveway, as you see there. By the way, it's 24 feet wide, not 20 feet wide. And we would share parking in both facilities together, 2/3, 1/3. My client would have the 1/3, they would have the 2. That's what the document said. My client was never a party to that document. So he brought over this document and said, you must sign it, you must sign it. And we analyzed it. And I did a little bit of math, and my client's property is 120 feet deep by 54 feet wide, which is 6,480 feet. And the other property at 720 is 120 feet by 81, 9,720. If you add those two together, and I'll save you with all the details here, it really turns out the numbers are 60-40. 60% for them, 40% for us. So we would be providing a driveway, and then we would share the parking back there. We would get 40%, they would get 60%. The agreement that they presented to us was 66, 33%. So we wanted our fair share. If we're providing the driveway, which, as you can see, it really turns out it is a fair share because they lose 7 parking spaces to put in their own driveway. So by us agreeing to provide them the 60-40, we were ready to do that. We presented, I actually sent them draft of documents, and unfortunately, they held tight, said we want to do the 2/3, 1/3. We said, well, we gladly would give you the 60-40, and if you had to get a variance, we would come down there and support you on it. We said we would go down there and support you, because eventually I told them someday we may need a variance, and we would support you we'd want you to support us. So we basically said, out of fairness, let's divide up the parking 60-40, we'll provide the driveway, we'll come down and support you at the variance that you'll need. I actually recommended to their attorney that you should go and get a variance. And I said you'd only need a variance of about 2. And from our perspective, we've only been fair to them. Somebody holding that saying that we refused to do anything is absolutely wrong. We were willing to do it. We still are. I brought a document here today, which is a proposed easement, which is the 60-40 shared driveway. And the only thing in there that is at all unusual, and we felt we had to do that at this point, is they cannot modify their property and have less than, whatever, 16 parking spaces, because they have the 7 plus the 9, 16. Because last thing I want to do is give them 60-40, then they put another spite driveway in, and then the parking spaces go down, because they eliminate the parking by putting another driveway in. So we want to make sure that they don't put a second driveway in, because frankly, it's really not good for the neighborhood. So we're talking about how wonderful it is that we have to work together and use all the parking spaces. But what do? They put a driveway in which eliminates 7 parking spaces for everybody to use. 7 parking spaces is a lot of parking spaces to wipe out when you put a driveway in. And to this day, my clients and I, we don't understand why would they not be willing to share 60-40. And that really only cost them like 1 or 2 parking spaces, and put another driveway in and take away 7. It just hasn't made sense. There's just something wrong. And their driveway is total width is I think 21 feet. Then once you put the wall in, it's going to be a tight 20. Our side, the driveway we use forever, is 24 feet. It's a much more meaningful, easy to drive through driveway. So we're somewhat flabbergasted that we're not here supporting them for their variance, because we thought we'd be here to support them because all they would need is 1 or 2, but them needing 7 and putting in a spite driveway just doesn't make sense to us. So we have to object on 2 bases. This is a totally self-inflicted wound on their part by putting in that spite driveway, taking out 7 parking spaces. And number two, the elimination of the 7 parking spaces is unjust to the whole area around there. You know, they talk about how easy parking is. Really, the barber shop across the way, which is one of his tenants, has a lot of people there. The parking is not open to the world. It's tight for parking down there. You may think it isn't, but it is.
Thank you. Any questions for? No?
I guess, Mr. Schutte,
Yes.
I'm wondering what's your objection? What property right are you losing by them using their parking spaces as a driveway? They're not going to park on your side of the property, correct?
Well, the standard really is it an injustice to the property owners in the district? Which means not just us, it means anybody else in the district. And I believe taking 7 parking spaces out of the equation for the whole district is detrimental. And they cannot represent to you that we did not offer them an easement, a mutual access, an easement agreement. We certainly did, and it was just not on the terms they wanted. They wanted 2/3, 1/3. We said we do 60/40. That is the ratio of our properties. If you calculate the square footage, it is 60% them, 40% us, and therefore that we thought that was a fair and equitable way to divide the parking.
Do you have the copy of that agreement you said here? Would you like to pass it around just for us to look at real quick? Any other questions?
I didn't bring one. Not for everybody, I think we can do it the other.
That's fine.
This is a new one. You haven't seen it. So we stand ready to grant them an easement based upon a 60/40 split with just the restriction that we don't want them putting in another spike driveway and eliminating their parking spaces. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak on this case this evening? Please come forward. Going once? All right.
Well, since I'm here, I haven't prepared comments. My name's Terry Schaefer. I have the property, happens to be across the street, 723 East 11 Mile. Had it for 20 years. And some reference was made to my property and the space I have, which nothing more than that's what it is. I have a building and 6,000 square feet of parking behind the property across the street. But I have no particular, points to make other than I will say that I am disappointed that my neighbors aren't getting along better, yeah. But I'm not here to take sides for sure. I don't know that much about it, but having had the property there for 20 years and much longer, a resident of Royal Oak and knowledgeable of the area, it's encouraging to see that there is development and interest in development, of course. But, disputes of this sort clearly don't help because it's getting congested. I guess that's good news. I see more clearly the challenge you folks have to decide such things. But I hope you decide wisely, and I'm on the other side of the street watching the show, but I certainly would hope this could get arranged in a way that we can all stay friendly. I guess that sounds like something you hear all too often in the world. I'm just repeating it. But your job isn't as easy as you might think here.
We get paid a lot.
I hope that, I hope the compensation is adequate. Thank you very much.
We're getting 4 times as much tonight as we usually get.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, any question? Yes.
Do you own the building that used to be a spray painting place? Is that your building?
Auto repair. Yeah.
Auto repair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have all that parking behind there, because as I understand, the auto repair isn't
Right,
there
right.
anymore.
I don't have a tenant in there. I'm the tenant these days. But
so you
to be
do-
clear, I have the property on the corner and the parking behind, which is 6,000 square feet.
Are you
fenced
going to be
and paved.
utilizing that building as for the same purpose?
I'm just working on my own projects in there. You say the same purpose, you mean as,
The spray painting and the.
oh, no, there's none of that going on, no. No, historically it was for years, oh, yeah,
Right.
sure.
That's why I was
No,
wondering,
that's
because
not
I know
going
that sometimes there was a little difficulty parking, because I think I took my car there once. So we ended up parking on Potter a lot, because all the cars and all the spaces in the back that looked like spaces were filled up with the to-do list.
Right, that's what it used to be. At this point, the comment I will make is, again, a longtime tenant who does have interest in things. In the most recent year, the parking has become considerably more congested in the area. And again, with my 20 years of experience around there, I used to just park on my property and whatever. Well, particularly in the past month or two with all the snow, I've been parking in the street, haven't shoveled the snow. I like to think that that's all legal and okay. Well, there's a lot of other vehicles I've come to be aware of parked on the street for others in the area who, park on Potter and go across the street. So I can see where longer term it's getting quite congested. When I show up with my one car, well, I can always find a place, but sometimes I can't find a place because people park adjacent to my building on Potter or across on the other side. And I've come to realize that, no prejudice intended, but it's people from Royal Oak Heating that are parking there. I didn't even realize it for a long time, but I begin to see them crossing the road and parking there. I'm not saying that in a complaining point, but it's an observation that people from their enterprise are parking there on Potter. And it's beginning to cause, congestion. Well, it's public parking, and I guess I just have to get there in time to get a space. And I don't shovel my backyard and open the gate and go in. I'm used to just parking my car on the street. But I've noticed that I can see the building congestion here as people from the, while Steve's building is empty, Mr. Ristagno, eventually perhaps there'll be even more pressure. Even there's barber shop people coming to park on Potter and going through the parking lot. So it's good news for Royal Oak. And I'm not saying it's bad news for me, but I will convey to you that I'd not intended to talk about it. Clearly, things are getting jammed up on Potter. That's the only place where there's free parking for everybody. So it's something to further consider that hadn't been brought up. I'm not complaining other than I am observing, When we run it, go ahead, yes.
So you're about to enter a lease agreement with parking spots with them?
No, I'm not. No,
Sorry, I
I'm not at this
misunderstood that.
point. No,
Okay.
not at this point. But I do have available parking.
Because I was going to say,
just,
how does that affect your business then? But-
Yeah, but, should I be meeting people at my building, which I occasionally do, I never allow them to park at Mr. Ristagno's lot just because I don't want to abuse my neighbor. He's got an obvious parking lot there. If they park there, I always have them move, park on the side street, park on my property or something. I've always taken note of that. I can just see the building a crescendo of a shortness of parking here. And the reason I'm here is to just observe what's going to happen. Certainly the elimination of the parking in the subject there is certainly not helping, but I'm just making the observation that I can see that eventually I won't have a legitimate point to be complaining when more and more people are parking on Potter. I just have to park further up the street. See, several of those houses on Potter have renters in them. And people show up and, they're parking in the street.
Okay.
I would hate to someday have to walk 5 houses to come to my building, but you could also say I could shovel my snow and park on my property. So I'll even fight against myself,
Thank you. Any other questions? No, seeing none?
Observation, good luck.
Yes, sir. You may come on up.
Hey, my name is Charlie Wolf, and I own Charlie's Haircuts across the street from where she proposes to put her business. And I've been in the business 20 years, and I've spent the last 6 months sparing no expense and wrestling my way through the inspection process to put a first-class family operation there. And I like the idea of her going in there. I think it would be a credit to the neighborhood. I see 11 miles, that's why I picked 11 miles, because I see it as an entrance to the city. And it's a great spot for my location. And I think she would be a credit to what we're doing. As far as the parking is concerned, I don't see that as an issue. My families are in and out in such a timely manner that there's no backup there. And we have like 15-plus spots in our lot. We use less than half of them. That's not a problem. And just listening to the two sides talk here, it seems like there's enough flux back and forth that there shouldn't be any way to leave this room without reaching some type of agreement. Thank you.
Any questions, sir? No. Anyone else to speak on this matter for public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Before we discuss, do you wish for us to proceed, or do you wish to table or adjourn to?
Chair, we would love to have a decision tonight. We have loan constraints and other issues, and if we're unable to move forward with it, we need to know, so we can procure other space. But we hope to have a robust conversation and a positive result.
Okay.
And if you folks want me to address any of the issues that were brought up by Royal Oak Heating and Cooling, I'd be more than happy to do so.
Did anyone have a question on that regard? I was going to say, since you made it sound like that there was such a heartache for them to do it, and then they come up and present their case, what discussion occurred with the 60/40 as to why you present one way and they present another way?
Great question. So, what I was going to say before I turn it over to you is 2.5 months ago, when they came, if they would have come to us with something, it would have been great, because that was right after planning. But when they came back to us, they said essentially, we got you over a barrel. So now the 66-33% thing that's been going on for 23 years, which I think they knew about, that's no longer good. Not only do we want 2 spots, but the 2 spots we want are in the front of this, right by the sidewalk. Those are the 2 spots we want. And Steve, be my guest.
What they did was delay. I took the agreement over there, I retyped it. They said we wanted it in our entity name, not a problem. I went home, I retyped it, I brought it back. They played around with it week after week. I kept calling, is it ready for me to pick up? I don't understand what the problem is. Just went on and on and on. Finally, we get this 60/40 agreement, and it's not up into negotiation. It's, this is what we want, end of story, go get a variance. We're not gonna talk about it anymore. They played around with it in the very beginning. They wanted a copy of the deed to make sure I was the rightful owner of the property. I've been there 23 years, and they wanted to make sure I'm the rightful owner. Then it was, okay, we want to put your wife's name on here, because Michigan's a dower right state. Wrong answer. Dower was done away with in April of 2017 in the state of Michigan. These were all just stall tactics, because I made the mistake of being a nice guy in the very beginning, because I thought we had been friends, and I said, look, I have a tenant that signed a 10-year lease. This is going to be great for the neighborhood. She's putting $400,000 in the building. It's good for your property, it's good for my property, but we got to get moving because she's going to lose her SBA loan. And they did everything they could possibly do to stall. And I finally wound up putting concrete blocks down so that maybe I could force them to make a decision. They just ignored it.
Didn't one of their employees tell you something, though?
Well, one of their employees basically.
I thank you for, but we don't want to rehash.
Okay.
Sure.
I have one question.
Sure, Mr. Cole.
How do you address Mr. Schuette's claims that the land is 60/40?
Well, this is the first I've heard of his calculations. I tried to talk to him out in the hallway, and he was very unfortunate.
There was
But-
another attorney that was involved. Wait a second, you should have, is the other attorney, not this one? I've had many conversations with him.
But for 23 years, it was 2/3, 1/3. And if you look at the size of those buildings, I have a
Mr.
hard
Reza,
time.
Mr. Reza.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Roll.
I'm just asking about the 60/40.
Yeah.
I know what
Okay, so we would still be here asking for a variance if we did exactly what they wanted, because it would still short us by 2 spots.
so you need a variance of 2 instead of 7.
Right. Well, it's a difference of 5. And we have gotten quite a bit more than that in the neighborhood through the leases that you saw. So we've got, what did I say, 12? So 12 is more than 5. So actually, I think we're going to be better off. And the problem is, and I think you can see that there's been a breakdown of the relationship between these two parties to the extent that having the co-use of this is not a great idea for the neighborhood. And that would be part of my issue. And, you know, it would have been nice to work this out 2.5 months ago, but like Steve says, you know, it's delay. We've got an SBA loan clock running down, and at the end of the day, you know, we have to ask whether we can invest $500,000 in this building on 11 Mile. And we'd really like to.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay, we'll bring it back here to the board for discussion. Anyone would like to start discussion or have a motion?
Joe, okay, if they'd gotten this agreement, then it would have just been okay. That's it. And the agreement was because they needed X number of parking spaces. So it's an agreement to use somebody else's?
No.
It's an official agreement?
No, it's
No.
for the access aisle. Shared easement to the existing driveway, the access
Okay, okay, yes,
The access aisle.
yes. Because if that happened, they would have had the amount of parking spaces they needed. Either way, you needed an agreement with another property owner in order to make everything work.
Needs to be recorded so that any property, the current property owners are aware, and anyone that's interested in buying in the future, when they do a title search, they'll be able to see that it's actually.
Official, yes,
Absolutely.
it's right there, which
And
we want, because we run into this all the time.
Happened lately.
Yes. So, for whatever reasons these two parties have been tripping over each other, the people that are before us went out and got other agreements, easements,
Leases.
leases.
Private leases.
Leases. Is that more of a problem than the other one? I mean,
Well, parties are certainly willing to enter into private agreements to share parking. The city doesn't have to be knowledgeable of it in any way, doesn't.
so we still would have to go through the, okay, because there's a lot of stuff here.
They may have a private agreement to lease parking spaces for X duration of time, or maybe someone fails to make the monthly payment that's required, or the time lapses and they don't refresh it. Do I legally have the right to go in and then close the business because they no longer have that agreement that's not recordable? No.
Good, okay, this, I just wanted to
I
get
don't
all
think,
this.
I don't think Ryan would
all
want
this
that
clear.
case in front of him, no.
Get all this clear, because it gets,
Yeah.
Because there's been many other cases where somebody had rented or whatever, X number of spaces, and they got an easement on that. Based on
We've
that.
had properties, I can think of one on Woodward Avenue that has come in front of you for a parking waiver, yet they explicitly said they had lease agreements with other nearby businesses to give them parking. How's that happen? If they're short parking, how do they give up their own parking?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
these are private agreements. We're not party to.
Want to understand all the pieces laying on the table.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other, someone want to, yes.
I don't know where I'm headed with this, other than to say I'm really frustrated with this case. I find it a little bit to be a longtime resident of Royal Oak and business people, and a new group coming in, and we certainly welcome new groups coming in. We certainly hope they get along with the people that were already here, and that doesn't sound like we're doing a very good job at that. And I feel like I'm not a zoning board commissioner. I'm not sure what I feel like, some kind of a referee. Hopefully the room's not going to jump into fisticuffs or something. I'm just joking about that. I think you guys are in a mess.
Ms. Zukin.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we can act as mediator. I'd love to see it be mediated between the two sides, because I think it's really a waste to have to settle it the way we're gonna have to settle it. But that's our responsibility. We have to decide one way or the other, unless the two sides can come to an agreement while we're sitting here. And I'm troubled about having to walk across 11 Mile. I think 11 Mile's got a lot of traffic on it. But if there's all those spaces to the west, and it's gonna be designed so people know that they can park there and just walk in that front walk, I think the problem is basically solved, although it's not the same as an easement, because an easement's a legal right to property. A lease, as Mr. Murphy said, can be broken at any time, and then there's a problem. But the problem is, for the business, I don't see, there's Potter Street, but I don't see people parking on Potter to walk over there, so I don't think it's going to affect the residential parking. It's, if it's a risk that the owners and tenants are willing to take, I don't know that I'm in a position to say no at this point.
Is that
No, I agree with Ms. Zukin too. I was a little torn until I heard about the 7 spaces to the west, and I think that helps solve the problem. The walkway leading to the front door, I think that's a possible good solution to that problem.
Has the petitioner ever considered just buying that little strip of land from them, from the neighbors to the west? I mean, I know you have first right of refusal for the building, but I don't know if you can divvy up a parking like that.
I haven't approached them about it, but I'd be more than glad to.
The first right of refusal is for the building and the entire parking lot. So if he ever decides to rent it or to sell it, we have the first right of refusal of any bona fide offer, and we built that into the agreement because they really think that they're going to have a hit and they want to grow. And because we wanted to protect that parking, because it was important to us to have it and to protect it. So when, and Mark, unfortunately, who owns it, couldn't be here today. He had to be in Grand Rapids, but he's a great guy. Really, really cool. If he rents it or if he sells it, we get the first right. And we did that to protect the parking and to expand.
Yeah, but Jim, the first right might not, I mean, somebody makes an insane offer, which we've seen happen. The first right doesn't mean a whole lot.
It's true, but I agree that, it's on, if the business can't assemble the parking, then it's on them. And a lot of it is personalities, Mr. Kroll. I think the world of Mark. He was happy to do the lease. He wants to see that building have some life. And in the building across the street with the parking. And honestly, for 85% of the time, I'd love to give him the parking at the hotel. I just don't think it's that much of a, an issue. And it's a 5-year lease. So in 5 years, I think we're going to see parking on one side of 11 Mile. I think we're going to see a lot of things that are going to cut down on this. I think we're going to see some traffic calming to, like the 11 Mile traffic is a little fast, but I think it'll be okay. But yeah, that's why we built in the first right of refusal. And I don't think we could just buy that strip from him. But certainly we could explore it. It's actually better parking in a lot of ways than what we have on the other side of the building. Did that answer your question?
I'd just like to add, I hate to see what's happening to the heating and cooling place, though, because I drove up that driveway today and I could barely get out. And you've got a lot of trucks back there. But again, I don't think I have any authority to insist that they can use the space across the way there.
I have 2 concerns, and one is the lease. I'm concerned about that. But secondly, I'm concerned that they're going to have more patients, customers, clients than is presented at this time. They have a 3,000 square foot building. I'm just seeing some problems there.
Well, I know in the past when we've had other medical places like that, like the one on Woodward, and I'm sure they can argue it too, it doesn't it's not advantageous for them to book more than what they can provide for. Because then customers don't want to be, especially with this case, like the physical therapy place, you don't want the people walking far. So that's why I can believe they're not going to do more than that. And if she wants, she can post that. But I agree with you, concerned about the lease too. So is anyone willing to make a motion or have any other
Well, I
discussion?
guess to move this along, I will move that we grant the parking variance as requested.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Sukin?
I think I've said everything that I need to say about this one.
Same thing, I stated my case. I think those 7 additional parking spaces will help solve that problem quite a bit.
Any other? Paige?
I think it's the same thing. I think especially with the treatment rooms, you said you had 4 treatment rooms and it looks like, is it 8 spots that they'll have? So even if all the treatment rooms are full, I think the patients will have enough parking, especially if the staff decides to either park across the street or those additional 7 spaces. So I think with the additional spaces that they've procured with the leases, I think there'll be sufficient parking.
Well, I am concerned about the parking. I also am concerned that this in a way is somewhat hardship self-inflicted, but also sounds like there's disagreement between both parties, so it's partially self-inflicted, maybe because of the way both parties interacted. But I do agree it will bring better to the neighborhood. My concern is just now having too wide of an aisle there, if just what this may cause in the future if they continue, if they put a wall right down there dividing the two and not being amicable neighbors. But the leases for right now work. And I agree, like I stated, the business I don't think is going to book more than what they can handle. Otherwise, people will stop going there. So in that case, I'm more inclined to vote in favor of this because of the leases that have been lined up. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No, no.
Please, noes, raise your hand, please.
Motion passes 5.
Motion passes 5-2. Variance is granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No other business that I know of, so we'll move to public comment, if anyone has any just general public comment.
Thank you.
None? Does anyone like to make the?
Motion to adjourn.
Board. Oh, Bob gets it that much. All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.